Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Huge rumours around Fernando Alonso's future over the last few days. He has now come out to categorically deny any suggestions that he will be retiring at the end of the season. This comes with a supposed clause in Sergio Perez's contract that allows Red Bull to terminate his deal with no financial implications if he has less than 50% of Max Verstappen's points. That is currently the case and could well open the door to what you see on screen at the moment. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, an update on the Formula 2 side. Well, actually, these guys are both Formula 3 drivers for now, but I'm pretty sure will be in F2 next year. Zach O'Sullivan, I think, is second in the F3 Championship. Franco Colapinto, I think, is fourth, doing rather well this year, and they will be both behind the wheel of the FW45 at Abu Dhabi. So, exciting stuff for both of these guys. Now, we don't expect Liam Lawson to be back in the car for the immediate term, but we'll see what he says in a second, which certainly implies that Red Bull's faith in Sergio Perez is wavering at the very minimum. Now, Alberto Brega, this is what kicked it all off a few days ago. As soon as Mexico ends, he tweeted this out. I don't want to believe the rumour they've just told me in the paddock. No, I don't want to believe it. Which sounds like he's more hesitant and concerned about this rumour than he is excited about the prospect, which is why when we discussed it the other day, I was more leaning in the direction of Spanish driver, something bad is going to be happening, i.e. Alonso is going to retire, rather than Alonso is going to go to Red Bull. Now, he actually makes another statement on that today, but it's quite clear that there will be a change at Red Bull at some point. Perez may get another year. I kind of doubt it. He may. But Liam Lawson has been told and has been very convinced himself he's not going to go anywhere else, and he says that when he does get to Formula 1, at least if he does, he will join with Red Bull in some way or another, either to AlphaTauri or, in I guess his ideal world, straight into Red Bull Racing, although that is rather unlikely. He also says, this quote especially interesting, as much as I would like to be racing a car, it's what Red Bull have decided is the best thing for me now. They want me to be 100% focused on being ready at any point, which sounds like they need him to be ready at some point, which may be very shortly or it may be midway through next season. There was lots of talk even a few weeks ago that if Perez does survive this year, they're just going to kick him out mid-next season and put Danny Rick in the car. And if they're going to do that anyway, you might as well do it now or as soon as is reasonably possible, which would open the door to Lawson to go to AlphaTauri alongside Tsunoda. So that might well happen, and or we could get a chance where there's another man in the Red Bull seat that's not Daniel Ricciardo and it's not Sergio Perez, and we'll get to that in a second. So, but yeah, the fact that Red Bull are telling Lawson, be ready, make sure you're ready for your Formula 1 drive, makes me think that, yeah, something is cooking up at Red Bull. No doubt about it. Now, as Juliana de Kessa says, lots of rumours lately. Rumours about where drivers are going to go, what's going to happen, but very little news. Doesn't mean the rumours, though, aren't exciting and interesting to talk about, especially when Joe Soward comes out with his green notebook. Now, he's obviously heard the rumours around the Alonso thing, and he gave his comment on it. And, okay, you can take all of this with a bit of a pinch of salt. A lot of the things he says, you never know how many sources it's coming from, but look, it's nonetheless interesting. And he says that as far as he's concerned, this is at least plausible. It's not maybe particularly likely, but it at least is plausible. So then he says in his notebook here, a well-known Spanish F1 journalist, of course Albert that we saw a second ago, declared himself excited by a rumour that he heard Sunday night. Now, I'm not sure I would say excited, but intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments below. It did not take long to hear from Spain that Alonso may be able to or about to embark on some more fancy footwork, with the suggestion being that he's not going to stay at Aston in 24, although he has what we believe to be a multi-year contract. Presumably it's just a 2-year deal for 23 and 24. The word is that he could pop up next year at Red Bull, and this would be very exciting for many people, just to see how Alonso would fare against Max, at least for one season, give him a bit more of a challenge than Perez has so far. And also knowing Alonso's history on joining teams and them going somewhat downhill, you could say. People might be hoping or expecting Alonso could join Red Bull and, you know, it could blow apart internally or something like that. And there's also been suggestions that maybe Alonso's ability at developing cars and helping do so isn't the best. I mean, you know, let's be honest, at Aston Martin, Vettel helped them make progress. The season begins and the car started great and now it's gone downhill. But look, let's say Alonso went to Red Bull. they're going to listen to Max more than Fernando anyway, but nonetheless, it's interesting to think about because Alonso's made many interesting career decisions in his time. Some of them have worked, even most recently Aston Martin. I mean, 7 podiums, you can't really sniff at that from what he was doing last season, but over time it's not proved to be particularly fruitful here in the second half of the season. So, of course, he goes on to discuss the implications of this, but seems to believe that it might be possible, especially because of this additional rumour that was mentioned about the Red Bull side of the story and how they could potentially terminate Perez's contract early. They extended him, you guys probably remember actually, it was Monaco 2022 when Perez's deal was extended into the end of 2024. Now that looks far less likely, and according to Saud, Fernando could very well fit into the team until Red Bull gets somebody younger, which is certainly true. This is another interesting part though. Red Bull can break Perez's contract without financial compensation, since at the moment, Checo does not reach 50% of Max Verstappen's points. For almost all of the season, Perez has been within 50% of Verstappen's points, but or over 50%. Now, that's not the case any longer. Perez is now closer to 0 than he is to Max, which, it's not great. And the fact that apparently, if that's even a clause in the contract, that is almost a clause that says, yeah, if you're below this limit, like, you're done, you know what I mean? Because if they're writing in that if you have less than 50% of Verstappen's points, we can terminate your deal with no financial compensation. Like, when Ricciardo was kicked from McLaren last year, they had to pay him however many millions just to terminate the deal. Red Bull apparently have written into the deal with Perez, like, yeah, if you're below this threshold, we can fire you with no recompense, which is probably what they would do in such a circumstance. The question is, who do you get? Because ideally, if you're Red Bull, and look, we've got all this talk from Formula One, that Formula One want to try and ensure that all the top teams have 2 very competitive drivers, so that even if one car is dominant, there's still a competitive season. It's not necessarily on, Formula One management can't choose the drivers for Red Bull, and okay, they want somebody better than Perez, who's closer to Verstappen, who can actually be relied on to back him up and be relied on to win races if Verstappen has issues that Perez most certainly cannot at the moment, and just to ensure that they win the Constructors more easily than they would have done otherwise in a more competitive season than we have had this time. They probably want someone who can out-qualify Max, 20, 30, 35% of the time, just, mix it up a bit more, basically be the Bottas to Hamilton. Let's not forget Bottas made Q3 for every race for Mercedes of 5 years in a row, which is just, that's what they want Perez to do. But he's not doing that. Could Ricciardo be that guy? Sure. How competitive would he be with Max? That's another question. Same story with Alonso, right? You bring Alonso into the team, you're kind of asking for trouble, And this is why, from the Red Bull point of view, it makes sense in terms of getting a very competitive driver pairing, but it's also a bit of a risk. But it's something they could potentially do. I mean, would Alonso say no to such an opportunity? It is highly doubtful. So this is when it was going around, right? Because Joe Soward says that it's possible, it's not out of the question. And okay, there's been some reports saying that, yeah, there's been no real talk about this, but still, there's still time left, and silly season hasn't done much this year. Maybe now is about the time where something happens. But of course, the other piece of this, right, was that, well, if Alonso is going and something's happening there with Alonso, and he's not going to go to Red Bull, because that still seems like an unlikely possibility, let's be honest. The more likely one is that he might call it a day and retire. But Alonso actually came out with, I think he did an interview or something with Fox Sports, and basically said, yeah, that's not the case. Now, look, just because a driver says something doesn't necessarily mean it's true, but we'll see. I mean, Perez, there were all the rumours that he was going to retire at Mexico, and who knows? Maybe he still will, but I'm sure that if he was going to retire and still does plan to, he would have probably planned to say something on the podium at the end of the Grand Prix, but he didn't make the podium, so that wasn't really an option. But still, we'll see what happens on that one. But Alonso does say, I like competition, I like to be fast, I hate losing. It's obviously not very difficult to motivate myself when I'm in the car. Not at the moment am I considering retirement. I know that I'm at the final stage of my career, but I don't see it that way at the moment. I don't have a specific date when I want to end my career. So, okay, read into that as you like, but he's basically saying, yeah, I'm not retiring. But of course, that's not the only rumour going around about Fernando Alonso, and he definitely doesn't deny the possibility of going to Red Bull. Now, we'll get back to Albert here, because he does another tweet on this today, having arrived at Interlagos for the Brazilian Grand Prix this weekend, saying, by the way, for many of you who have asked me about the rumour, I can only tell you that it had nothing to do with driver exchanges between teams or withdrawals. So, yeah, what could this mean? Because, okay, we had the rumour the other day about Mike Elliott leaving Mercedes, and that was then confirmed. Was that the rumour that these guys are talking about? I don't know. It seems unlikely unlikely. It didn't seem like that was coming, you know, like Elliott had a Mercedes. It happened a while ago anyway that he'd left the TD role and he'd effectively been demoted / promoted to CTO, and then he officially resigned yesterday. I don't know if that really aligns, especially when, you know, Albert's tweeting about it as if, you know, he's particularly upset. So I don't really know. But he now says that what he was tweeting had nothing to do with driver exchanges or withdrawals, which, you know, I guess translates to Fernando Alonso isn't retiring, nor is my tweet about potential driver exchanges. Doesn't mean they aren't necessarily happening, but just Fabregas' tweet wasn't along those lines. So he's also saying that no, Alonso's not retiring. But could he join Red Bull? I mean, yes, it's not out of the question, but I'm not sure that Red Bull would do that, even though as much as I would like that to be the case, I'm not sure Red Bull would do that. But there are a few pointers right now that say that at least it's possible, maybe it's even plausible. The chances of that occurring next year are probably significantly lower than 50%, but there may be some level of chance, which is always exciting to think about, especially, I guess, depending on what happens with Hamilton and Perez. They're currently in the fight for P2 in the standings. Hamilton would already be level with Perez if he wasn't disqualified in Austin, and even the fact that Hamilton didn't score in those two races, he did still score in the sprint races, and actually, I think managed to still outscore Perez in Qatar, despite the fact that he didn't finish, where he didn't get past the first corner in Qatar, just as Perez didn't in Mexico. So Hamilton still believes he can make it. Now, it's not the biggest deal, really. I think the main focus of Mercedes is just to beat Ferrari for second in the Constructors. That's a bigger deal, really, than Hamilton getting second in the Drivers, but it would be a massively impressive achievement from him, and it would be an absolute disaster class in Perez. And let's be honest, given the DSQ from Hamilton and given the first time incident in Qatar, really that fight and that charge from Hamilton could already have been over at this point. And yeah, it's just really bad from Perez that this is even a debate. And Hamilton also, let's say he doesn't win in Sao Paulo, because realistically that's the only chance you would think Mercedes ever winning for the rest of the season, because Las Vegas, the massive straight, that's unlikely. Abu Dhabi was not a good track for their W13 last year. The Red Bull and the Mercedes, or the Ferrari, were far quicker there. So probably Hamilton's chance to win this year is in Sao Paulo this upcoming weekends. And if he doesn't, but he still gets P2 in the standings, that'll be the first time in, I think, over 50 years. It's maybe 1971 that a driver has got second without winning a race, which is, I guess, testament to Verstappen, but also testament to Hamilton's performances in the second half of the season, opposite, of course, to Sergio Perez. And despite the disqualification and everything, over the last 5 race weekends, Hamilton has outscored Perez by, on average, 7 points a weekend. And 20 points gap, 3 race weekends to go. That would mean that Hamilton would finish on this current pace 1 point ahead of Perez. Now, there's only 1 sprint race to go this weekend in Brazil. After that, it's just the regular weekend format with practice, qualifying, and then the race itself. And to be honest, if Perez just finishes the races, he probably holds on to P2. It's unlikely to imagine that Perez, if he just finishes the Grand Prix, will rescind P2. But, you know, if Perez gets 1 DNF and Hamilton finishes all the races, then you're probably thinking that it's advantage Hamilton in that case. But yeah, if Perez just makes it to the checkered flag, he should be able to hang on. But he probably won't hang on still. He might do if he gets a lot of P2s. But on current pace, Perez is not going to be within that 50% threshold of Max. And if that's the case, he's probably going to be gone regardless if he gets P2 or not in the Drivers, because, you know, finishing P2 or P3 is kind of irrelevant when you look at the actual standings and you see the points difference between himself and his teammates, which is not especially pretty. Now, just to add to some of the hopium that's going around from Team LH or whatever they call themselves on Lewis Hamilton, because this is kind of a crazy stat, really. For the last 5 years, the driver who won the Brazilian Grand Prix also took pole at the Hungarian Grand Prix. And I was like, damn, that's interesting. But yeah, of course, last year, right, George Russell took a surprise pole in the Hungaroring and went on to win at Interlagos. This year, of course, if there's a, you know, the driver that took pole at Hungary in another surprise was Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. So make of that what you will. Or maybe just another record or like streak, let's say, for Verstappen to break. And probably that's going to be the case if he doesn't have any issues with his car. I imagine Red Bull learnt quite a lot from their time around there last year. And just before we close out, there was this that went around about Malaysia. always talk every so often around potential tracks and who's going to return, which tracks are going to come back, which tracks are going to go, this type of stuff. And apparently Malaysia could be back on the cards at some point or another. A new agreement with Petronas gives organisers a crucial financial boost, and they need the money to pay F1 to do it there. So we'll see on that, but definitely a track that is, well, highly regarded by many of the fans. So we'll see how that goes. And also just a quick final thing. Felipe Massa is actually not going to be there this weekend. I think he's been told, just give it a miss, Felipe, after all this drama about the Hamilton 2008 title. He even mentions, I think yesterday, that he would even consider the possibility of sharing the title with Hamilton. Like, right, well, you went from it's definitely yours now to like, maybe we can share it. So yeah, I kind of doubt that this legal challenge is going to go particularly far, but very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.